Yeah, my name's Klara. I've been doing photo and film for a bit over 10 years, and I'm mostly self-taught. I focus on portraits in my photography, and currently I'm doing a bachelor's in African studies, and I want to pursue a master's in investigative journalism because through that I can connect my academic and my photographic interests, which I've already been doing aside from university, like also in this grant project. But I do want to pursue that professionally. In my work, I've recently focused on a series about queer communities, both in Leipzig, where I study and where I live right now, and also in Nairobi and Dar es Salaam, where I've also lived. Most recently, I spent a year in Dar es Salaam studying at the university there. The work is both personal to me and also really inspiring, and I'm really grateful that I can share it with you today. Next slide, please. So the title of my project is Jinsi Tulivyo, which in Kiswahili means the way we are or how we are. And it's also kind of a play with words for those who don't speak Kiswahili. Jinsi can also mean like a gender. So I thought that was kind of good. So that's exactly what I envisioned with my project, was to create a visual narrative about queer life in Dar es Salaam and in Nairobi that's unbiased and also celebratory of the people in those communities. Next slide, please. So this is the mood board that I had going into the project, and also what I used to apply for the grant. It's a mix of pictures that I took myself in the past, and also some that I found on the internet. And you can kind of see that I didn't really have like a very clear aesthetic yet, but I do think that I was able to develop that later on in my project, as you will hopefully see. Next slide, please. I want to talk a little bit about my vision for the project. So different kinds of queer identities. Being un-African is an argument that we hear often in the discourse around sexuality and gender on the continent. And this both isn't true and also negates the rich history of queerness in Africa, which has existed there forever, just like anywhere else in the world. And I don't have time to get into the reasons for why these kinds of arguments exist, but I'll just leave it at that. For the grant, I envisioned a series that boldly celebrates these queer identities in East Africa, and specifically in Nairobi and in Dar es Salaam. And I conceptualized 3 shoots that would each represent a different facet of queer life and lived experience. And the first of those shoots took place at a beach in Dar es Salaam. You can see the first picture in this slide. Yeah, next slide, please. I chose the beach as a location because it's a place that's typical of Dar es Salaam because the city is by the ocean and people gather there for various reasons. I also just like the imagery of the ocean in connection with this shoot. Next slide, please. And the concept for this shoot was to visualize and portray a queer relationship. And in this case, for me, it wasn't important to show specifically whether the relationship was platonic or romantic, just for it to be a queer relationship. Next slide, please. Queer friendships have particular importance in the context of marginalization and ostracization because they can provide a safe space where queer people can relate to each other and also support each other. Next slide, please. This brings me to my second shoot for this project. The location was at Ololua Nature Trail in Nairobi. And the concept for the shoot was for it to simply be a fashion shoot. And through the process of preparing and shooting, the results differed a bit from the original vision that I had. And I will get into that briefly later, but this flexibility is also important to me in general. And I wanted to involve the protagonists in creating the narrative as well, because I wanted the pictures to feel like they do represent them and feel like it represents who they are. Next slide. Here's some brief just information about like specs and the tech that I used for this. I don't want to get into that too much, but maybe I can say I love using natural light in my work, which I also did in the first 2 shoots, and the last one was in the studio. Next slide. So as I mentioned, the shoot turned out a bit differently than I had planned it originally. So the model or the protagonist for this shoot was Mundia, or who also models professionally, both on runways and in fashion shoots. So I wanted us to work closely together on making these images. And finding the dress actually was what further inspired us to make this into kind of like a bridal shoot, and was also Mundia's idea to sort of make this signify saying yes to your identity, which I found to be a really beautiful analogy. Next slide, please. So I want to just quickly talk about the questions that I had going into the project. So I asked myself, what are realms and spaces of queer life in the metropolises of Dar es Salaam and Nairobi? And by spaces, I also mean physical and metaphorical spaces, and how I can translate and condense these into a series. Because of course I was limited. I mean, this is just one project and there's 3 shoots. So I chose 3 aspects that seemed most salient and important to me. But of course, queer people and their experiences aren't a monolith and very diverse. So this is just like a small insight. Another question was about the locations, because I had to think about where we could shoot so that it would be safe for the protagonists. And this was specifically important for the outside shoots, but we managed it pretty well by choosing days and times of the day where not a lot of people were around. So yeah, that worked out pretty good. And what was important as well was the question of how to ensure a fruitful collaboration, because I wanted to involve my protagonists as much as possible. And then lastly, and maybe most importantly, I wondered how I could use the grant to amplify their voices and their stories, because my positionality is important, I think, because I see myself as a part of like a global queer community, but as a white person, I do have privileges that my protagonists don't have. Like when I'm moving in these queer spaces in Nairobi and Dar, that doesn't involve the same risks for me as it does for my protagonists. And yeah, one of those physical spaces of queer life is a ballroom in Nairobi, which brings me to the last shoot of my grant project, of which the first picture is already in this slide. Yes, thank you. And I would love to get into the history of ballroom more, but I don't have time for that in this presentation. But depicted here is the house father of the House of Andeti, who founded this house, and the protagonists from this last shoot are all ballroom performers and dancers who are part of the House of Andeti. Next slide, please. What was interesting for me to understand was what ballroom culture looks like in Nairobi specifically, because it comes from Black, trans, and queer communities in New York City in the US. And so I wondered how it manifests in a Kenyan context. And I found that ballroom traditions are continued, and there's also an influence of fashion styles and dance that are informed by Kenyan culture, and more specifically. Next slide, please. So I just want to say a few things about House of Andeti. So it was founded in 2022, and they offer ballroom dance sessions, workshops, and also host balls in Nairobi. And they support queer Kenyans by providing a platform for their self-expression and for queer Kenyans to embrace their identities. Next slide, please. So most importantly, I thought it was to say that House of Andeti fosters queer culture in an African and a Kenyan context. And I think the community aspect is also really important, because these balls are a place for queer people in Nairobi to gather, where performers can show off their skills in dancing and fashion design, and the spectators can also enjoy the performances and mingle and get together. Yeah, that's already the end of my presentation. I just want to express my gratitude to all of my protagonists. I had so much fun creating these images, making this series, and I'm endlessly inspired by your creativity and your courage. And thank you so much for listening to my presentation.
Thank you, Klara.